Thank you for staying with us. The Nigerian Economic Summit Group has highlighted some risks and opportunities with businesses within the private sector that what they will face, most likely face in 2025. The NESG highlights this in its latest report titled Nigeria's Private Sector in 2025, Adapting to Economic Uncertainty and Growth and Resilience. It said a complex, mixed and economic, political and regulatory uncertainties would shape the Nigerian business environment this year. It pointed out that ongoing government reforms, shifting global economic dynamics and internal structural challenges would continue to influence market conditions, investment decisions and business operations. Key policy changes, it noted, includes the removal of fuel subsidy, electricity subsidies, exchange rate harmonization, and tax reforms. Well, let's talk to an economist with the NESG, Dr. Shakiruddin Taiwo. Thank you so much. It's good to have you here again.
Yeah, it's good to be here again to discuss some of our flagship reports that we're actually using to analyze the economy and actually give businesses strategic pivotal focus for the year.
Great stuff there. Well, let's start with those things that you've identified. I like the report title, Nigeria's Private Sector in 2025, Adapting to Economic Uncertainty, Growth and Resilience. There's a lot around this economic uncertainty for some time. We've been talking about it even before the reforms and all of that. So are we still uncertain about our economy?
And so, as you know, there are global dynamics that are determined, that are unpredictable. Yeah. So as a result of this, so there are some element of uncertainty that comes with either the ambitious or progressive plans of either government or from external parties. Like the world is actually battling with Trump 2.0 at the moment, and they actually highlighted in some of your introductions and how this is actually changing the dynamics. These, as at November 2024, are uncaptured dynamics that is now shaping global economic trade, affecting global dynamics, global supply chain disruption. And I think earlier this week, we saw the Houthis fighters in Yemen resuming their attack on the Red Sea, and that's actually taking off the relief that has been for the global logistic businesses. So all this comes to influence business private sector performance in the year. And we must always take note that we have existing underlying conditions that are affecting private sector in 2024 that will be brought into this year. And we actually highlighted this clearly in our report. Instead of focusing on the macro, we did a little bit of macro because our thought is that our macroeconomic outlook in 2025 has actually dealt with this. But we then actually deep dive into the performance of private sector in 2024. From the overall analysis, we actually noted that private sector actually had a weak and negative growth in 2004. But however, there is a slight recovery in December of 2024. And this recovery we could see sustaining this year. And we actually measured the performance of the private sector using NESG, Stanbic IBTC, Business Confidence Monitor. This is a monthly business performance monitor index that is jointly co-developed by the NESG and the Stanbic IBTC group. And I've started this since last year, and I have made sure this time series studied the trend. And we actually did a further analysis to actually examine our index to see if it actually captures the performance of businesses with the Stanbic IBTC Purchasing Manager Index. So in the report, you will see both has different flow of trend. And this actually tells us that, more like your trend is actually capturing the performance of business. And across sectors as well, you have to note that though there are divergence performance across sector, but we actually noted that trade and manufacturing sector are the most affected sector in 2024. Their times of negative performance was deeper than the other 5 sectoral categories. However, we noted that the service sector was able to push some of its costs to consumers. So as a result of that, was least affected by some of this shock that we have in 2024. So then looking at some of this factor, we then zoom in to then say, what are those risks that would affect business in 2025? I'm not sure if you want me to go into that now.
No, I'd like you to go into them because I know that in some of them, increased adoption of automation, rising business costs, job losses, and all of that we've seen, and also disruption in the labor environment might also affect it. But tell us, take it away and tell us more.
So you must understand that we are not predictors of doom.
Because I'm even looking at some of the of the bars on air, looking at you talking about the loss made by companies exiting the countries, small businesses that have shut down in recent times. They're a bit worrisome.
And so all these are basic symptoms of what has actually been occurring in the last 10 years on the economy. However, some of these uncertainties are not going away. We have actually identified around 6 basic broad categorization of uncertainties. One is the macroeconomic risks that are around high exchange rate. And I think I mentioned the last time I was in this studio that stability in exchange rate is good for businesses. However, the level of exchange rate is also more important.
You said it.
For the sectors that are relying on imported goods and services, to them, high exchange rate translate to high cost of import. And for our manufacturing sector and our trade sector at this moment, that means cost of operation for them. We also mentioned the issue of high inflation. Though we have rebased our GDP, we have rebased our inflation, sorry. Yes. The rebased GDP is not yet out, but we have rebased our CPI, and we could see our CPI at around 28%. So that's also high for businesses. From our estimation at the NESG in our 2024 macroeconomic outlook, our level of inflation that supports the private sector was estimated at 11%. So it means government do projected 15% this year. It might still crowd out some level of growth, but it's still good. Government must actually work to bring inflation to a level. Single digit is good. 11% would be commendable. But doing 15% would make business to have some breathing space. We also actually identify some social and political issues that will also affect businesses this year. If you check our political landscape, we have seen the movement. And this movement creates some policy risk for businesses. We will see the campaign and non-decamping. Everyone gears toward 2027.
Yeah, that political
risk is also
there.
Is also there. We also identify some existing underlying structural and infrastructural risk as well. There is energy. From our BCM report, inadequate power supply was the most challenging business obstacle that affected private sector in 2024. Then followed by availability of exchange rate and insecurity. All these are challenges that we are taking into this year. I know the TCN celebrated over 5,000.
But after that, there's been a flip-flop. So I must tell you.
And businesses will then have to rely on alternative sources of energy that are very expensive. And what this does to businesses is that it adds to their bottom line. Their overhead costs actually shoot up. We also have risks around social risk.
Yeah.
This has to do basically with our jackpot syndrome.
Yeah.
A lot of talents are leaving Nigeria.
And how are we replacing them?
It then comes to be a risk for businesses. You know, it took our banking sector a long time to replace a lot of their IT staff that left. And I know some are still battling the issue at the moment. Yeah. And then we have issue of rising unemployment that then creates issue of high risk of unorganized crime. You know, Lagos has to be a 24-hour economy. But can we achieve that now when you have unemployment that is driving unorganized crime? Unorganized crime is just pocket of crimes around the country when people are aiming to survive. We then have the global risk. And I think I've alluded to that at the beginning of my discussion. We then have issue in global disruption at the moment. We have 2.0. So in our report, we actually dedicated about 3 pages to from 2.0.
Because that's definitely going to shape activities in the year moving forward.
Surely. So it's affecting Nigeria that relies more on imported aluminum is going to affect a lot of these. And I hope if your studio was planned for this year, maybe your cost will have shot up.
Of course, it would have almost doubled, if not tripled. Well, it's an interesting document. That's what I'm flipping through here. But there's some structural barriers and challenges too that we'll definitely go through in the year. I'm sure some of them were identified in this document. But as we face these challenges, many analysts like you and of course the NESG would say government needs some targeted policies aimed at addressing impact of some of this ugly developments. So what are these targeted policies? Because yes, there are challenges. How do we address them? Like if you heard my first conversation, Chatham House came up earlier this week and says, Nigeria, stay course this your, what's it called, reforms. Don't bend, don't go back. And I'm sure it was at NESG last year, the guy from IMF, I think, when he was speaking, he said it. He said Nigeria must stay the course. So what do you make of all of this?
So what we actually did in this report is to actually not, so government in this report, and with respect to private sector, are exogenous factors, can determine government reforms. But what we did was to then identify opportunities that I imagine for various reforms of government. The subsidy removal is out of the way.
Yeah.
Electricity subsidy might need to go. Maybe our band B and A, there is migration here and there. So what we then did to the businesses to say, businesses.
I think they'll be happy to hear that. But go ahead, please, Doc.
So this say, businesses, can you come into the room and identify this opportunity? So what we then did was to say, from government stabilization strategy or reforms, from government continuation of these reforms, these are emerging opportunities that you need to actually optimize or leverage for your growth and build business resilience. The first is import substitution. We actually spoke extensively around this. Can we have backward integration for some of our imported raw materials? We know some of these FMCG companies are actually doing this, now producing some of their own inputs. This reduces the forex or exchange rate pressure on their bottom line, their balance sheet. There's all this away. So we actually talked about local manufacturing as well. We are actually saying this even. Dangote is a local refinery manufacturer, and we are also seeing the benefit. As at the time I was coming into this place, though unconfirmed, I was told that oil price is now 800. But it comes, the price dynamics you actually also mentioned could only occur when you have local manufacturing taking place, local industrialization. We actually point to this, and we also say government needs to look at energy and resource development. We have some energy-based resource in this country that the government needs to optimize, that the private sector needs to look into that development. Though we have had FDI in times of Chinese FDI in lithium to battery development in Nigeria, we are looking at private sector optimizing this as well, so that increases energy sources, so that renewable energy would be affordable. Then we also looked at agro-processing and export growth. We need to move from the area where Nigeria needs to move some of their export to Ghana to then meet some level of European EU standard. We need to optimize this area as well. So maybe we'll need an aggregator in Nigeria that put these small other farmers together, aggregate, ensure this product meets international standard, and we export. And not only exporting as well, there is agro-processing that needs to take place. We need to add value to a lot of these things. We all know refined cocoa powder is more expensive than ordinary cocoa. So these are more clear. We all know cassava chips is more expensive in international market and valuable than just ordinary cassava. So these are what we are saying, agro-processing. We also look at digitization and technology. We can't run away from that. We have seen a lot of, even some educational sector in Nigeria running an hybrid mode, a less of physical interactions between. So these are opportunities that they need to take into. Real estate development is huge for this year. And where I am is an example of what real estate could do for this year.
Look at the whole environment here.
The whole environment. So we are telling the private sector, you need to do this. We also look at the health care and the telemedicine, more like using technology to drive some of these medical operations. So I could see, I've heard the medical practitioners talking about an expert directing a surgical process from Dubai. Is an expert is unable to be in the country, and the surgical process needs to take place. Some of these are healthcare facilities that we need to actually optimize. Our tourism and hospitality is huge, and I know there is one down this place. So the government needs to do this. Infrastructure development is a non-negotiable to do this. So we are looking at this, that government reforms might be slow, but emerging opportunities that are coming from these reforms, the private sector needs to quickly optimize and leverage them for growth and to build business resilience. We can't afford our businesses closing shops. What that means for us is loss of employment, loss of revenue to government, and loss of prosperity to Nigeria as a whole. And if you know, at the NESG, We are a private sector-led economic think tank. Our role is to support Nigeria to develop a globally competitive and private sector-driven economy. So in doing this, we need to keep turning out some of these reports that one targeted at the government, like our macroeconomic outlook, but this outlook is targeted at businesses, where business leaders can be in the room, go through this report, and actually identify some of those areas as specific to their sector and businesses.
It looks pretty good. And we've talked about the global and, of course, and the trade risks and all of that. But moving forward, what is your entire outlook for the business environment despite these challenges?
For this year, we think some of the shocks induced by the reforms of the government will subside this year.
Oh, that's a good one. That's one good one. One good one from NESG. Thank you so much. Go ahead, please.
And it's not because it's magic. It is because businesses are generally adapting and evolving their strategy to suit some of these environments. So the shock is not affecting them like last year. So we also feel that there will be opportunities in terms of the NBS is rebasing the GDP. They are expanding the coverage of their sector at the moment. So it will help businesses to look at opportunities that are untapped. So it will help. The third is that we'll see a more structured, balanced regulatory environment, especially around tax. So one of the issues we have, and small businesses have identified, especially MSMEs, when you check a lot of their reports, and in our report as well, multiplicity of tax regulation was the 5th biggest business challenges in 2024. So with tax reform 2024, I would say, coming up in 2025, we hope the National Assembly is able to pass this as quick as possible. Businesses will be able to say, if I make X amounts in 2025, this is what I would have to pay to the government. Not all those form of non-state actors pay that. We will see the government, even from the budget, concentrating more on road construction, those big infrastructure that are supporting productive activities. It's our belief that when this come on board, it will support the productive sector to grow. And some of all these forms, we would think the businesses will perform better than what they did in 2024.
Interesting stuff there. I must thank you, Dr. Shakiruddin Taiwo, the economist at the Nigerian Economic Summit Group. Thank you so much for your time. It's always interesting having the chat with you on the program and having you live in the studio. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
All right.